Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. This is Pastor's Point of View number 336. This is being released on January the 10th, 2025. So this becomes our first show, our first podcast, if you will, of the new year. We did have a podcast earlier this year with Dr. Joe Martin, but this is our first prophecy update for the new year. And as you look at our preview slide, you can see these categories that we're going to explore in this particular show. I want to bring you up to speed on the Gog Magog alignment. Some powerful information on the kings of the East and their role prophetically and how the world is being shaped for their role in the end times. And then anti-Semitism is on steroids. And so I want to bring you up to speed on some developments there. So with all of that being said, let's just jump right in and let's start with Gog Magog. Of course, here we're dealing with the famous or infamous invasion depicted in Ezekiel 38 and 39 with Russia, Libya, Sudan, Iran, Turkey, etc. invading the nation of Israel in the last days. If you want some documentation as to why we would see those countries in Ezekiel's list of countries that will invade Israel in the last days yet future, I recommend my book. Had it up there a moment ago. The Middle East Meltdown will give you that documentation. But having said all that, look at this particular map here that we use. You know, this map is essentially showing you the different players that are going to invade Israel in the last days, albeit Ezekiel's prophecy given 2,600 years ago in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And three of the players are Russia. And then we've got circled there in North Africa a couple of players that really don't get a lot of attention in most prophecy updates and prophecy ministries today, but there they are in Ezekiel's list of invaders. We have an entity called Put or Libya and Cush or the Sudan. And what I've been told by a lot of people is, you know, we're a long way away from this Gog prophesied and predicted Gog Magog invasion, because while Russia, Iran, and Turkey are falling into prophetic orbit, there's no, the nations, I should say, of Libya and the Sudan are not falling into prophetic orbit. And we don't see any real harmony between Russia, the leader of this invasion, and Libya and Sudan today. And so people say, well, because there's no Russian presence in Libya and Sudan, we're a long way away from the Gog Magog invasion. And we have done a lot of different programs trying to counter that mentality. Because as I'm going to show you, there is a very strong Russian presence in both Libya and the Sudan. So this brings us to this particular article here, and I'm going to give a hat tip to Don Stewart on one of his prophecy updates. He brought this article to my attention. It's a very important article, and it's a very significant article. And the reason that article is so significant is it details, if you will, the presence of Russia in North Africa. So let me read to you a little bit from this article. This was a fairly recent article, December the 27th, 2024, and it says this: Africa as a permanent priority for Russia. In today's multipolar world, our country plays a key role. This is written from the Russian perspective. It is now at the crucial moment for humanity that it is important to finalize priorities in international affairs. The African continent is undoubtedly one of those main priorities. Just a couple of excerpts, if I may, from this article. It says this concerns all supporters of the multipolar world and especially our country, Russia. Naturally, one of the key axes of this orientation is the Russian-African strategic relations. So clearly Russia has a presence in North Africa, contrary to what many people say, that we're a long way away from the Gog Magog invasion because we don't see Russia today cooperating with North Africa when Ezekiel's prophecies predicts that Russia would be in alliance with North Africa in addition to Turkey and Iran on the eve of this invasion into Israel. The article says, according to a number of reports from enemies and rivals, Russia is now strengthening its presence in Libya, especially in the east of that country, in support of the Libyan National Army under the command of a particular field marshal whose name is Haftar. The article says Russia is further strengthening its military presence both in Libya itself and on the African continent as a whole. It's very interesting that not only an additional and impressive Russian military contingent arrived in eastern Libya, but also a number of representatives of the Syrian officer corps, in particular the Air Force. By the way, the article says, we cannot be pleased by the active practice by the military of the Libyan National Army in working with FPV drones, using the example of the Russian experience in the special military operations. So there is Russia working with the Libyan National Army, and they're working together with FPV drones. And here's how the article concludes, written from the Russian perspective. Finally, the best unpleasant surprise for our enemies would be the preservation of our military bases in Syria with the creation of new ones. New ones. Where? In Libya, and in time, the Sudan as well. So the article concludes with the Russian ambition to have military operations, not just in Libya, but the Sudan. Now, that's exactly what Ezekiel 38 and 39 predicts, with Russia teaming up along with others, Libya and the Sudan invading Israel in the last days. And so what is happening before our eyes as we speak is the final pieces of the puzzle, if you will, of the Gog Magog invasion are being put into place. And that's why we bring this to your attention in a prophecy update. We have a few pictures from X to sort of document what the NEO article says. Notice this picture here. It says breaking. These are all recent pictures from X. It says Russia building a powerful military base where? In Libya, under the help of the UAE, and who else is helping them here? The Sudan. The article, or this X-shot screenshot, says, after a huge military withdrawal of the U.S. and France, now Russia and the UAE decide to establish new military bases in the African Union. So this corroborates what the prior article that I just read to you indicates. Here's another screenshot from X, and it says satellite images appear to show the construction of a major Russian military base where? In southern Libya. The base is located at a strategic point near the border of Sudan. Notice how Sudan and Libya keep being linked here with Russia militarily. And Chad, and close to the gold mines that are in that particular region. Here is one more screenshot from X, and it says here, UNA Air Force I'm going to have to take my glasses off because my prescription is not good enough to see that fine print. It says UNA Air Force pilots completed training in Russia. Local sources report that more than 20 officers of the Libyan National Army Air Force are or have completed combat training in Russia. It is specified that the Libyans were trained on the MiG-29 and the Su-24. So all this talk about, gee whiz, there's no Russian presence in North Africa, there's no Russian presence in Libya and the Sudan, therefore we're a long way away from the Gog Magog invasion. I would say to that assertion that's nonsense. People that say that are not up on current events, and there is a very active Russian presence in those areas, and it's a military presence. So the final pieces of the puzzle, as we said earlier, the final parts that are necessary for the Gog Magog invasion are being put into place. The tiny specifics of God's word are on the precipice of being fulfilled, and we're seeing the stage set for this Gog Magog invasion like we've never seen before. Yeah, we can focus on Iran and Turkey and Russia all we want, and there's plenty of action there that we routinely report on. But look at the activity between Russia and these North American countries, North African countries, I should say, that Ezekiel predicted in Ezekiel 38 and 39, in particular Libya, as well as the Sudan. Continuing on a little bit more with this infamous Gog Magog invasion that's on the horizon, let me draw your attention to our map again, and you see the big three. These are the ones that get most attention in prophecy ministries and prophecy updates. Turkey, Russia, and Iran invading the nation of Israel in the last days. So Turkey, a place where Israelis once took their vacations, is basically now, I would argue, almost in a state of war, pre-war, whatever you want to call it, as the relations between Turkey and Israel not only have disintegrated, but they've moved into hostility. It's almost as if Turkey and Israel, as I speak, are now in a state of Cold War. Maybe not yet a hot war, which is coming, according to Ezekiel's prophecy, but a Cold War. And to document that, let me give you this article here from the Jerusalem Post, January 6th of this year, 2025, and it says this: Israel must prepare for potential war with Turkey. A specific committee within Israel, I believe you pronounce this, the Nagel Committee, has warned. And here's what the article says. It says, Israel must prepare for a direct confrontation with Turkey, according to the Nagel Committee's latest report on the defense budget and security strategy. The committee established by the government warns that Turkey's ambitions to restore its Ottoman-era influence could lead to heightened tensions with Israel, possibly escalating into conflict. The report highlights the risk of Syrian factions aligning with Turkey, creating a new and potent threat to Israel's security. And here's a direct quote from the report. It says, the threat from Syria could evolve into something even more dangerous than the Iranian threat. Close quote. So this particular quote indicates that Turkey is actually more hostile to Israel than is Iran, if you can imagine that. I mean, this is the region or the country, as I said before, where Israelis used to take their vacations. But Ezekiel said the relationship between Turkey and Israel would disintegrate. It would move into Cold War, and it would move into ultimately hot war. And so we're seeing the stage being set for that component of the Gog Magog invasion as well. The Nagel Committee submitted its recommendations to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz and Finance Minister within Israel on Monday, outlining a comprehensive strategy to address these emerging threats. Netanyahu addressed the report. So this is a report generated at the pleasure, if you will, of the Israeli government. Netanyahu addressed the report stating, quote, "We are witnessing fundamental changes in the Middle East. Iran has long been our greatest threat, but new forces are entering the arena, and we must be prepared for the unexpected. This report provides us with a roadmap to secure Israel's future," close quote. Netanyahu calls this hostile relationship with Turkey unexpected. I would say this: if you're a student of Bible prophecy, it's very expected, because Ezekiel clearly identifies Turkey along with Russia as one of those invaders in the last days. In fact, notice again another screenshot from X. This one is just mind-blowing. It says here, breaking: the son of Turkish President Erdogan has originated a massive rally calling for Turkey to take over Israel, close quote. And so there's a screenshot of the giant rally that was organized by Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, his son. And the whole point of this rally is we are getting ready to take over, as Turkey, we're getting ready to take over Israel. Hello, Ezekiel 38 and 39. And of course, in a report like this, emphasizing Turkey and North Africa, we don't want to leave Iran out of the mix. Don't think that Iran's hostilities towards Israel have calmed in the least. Notice this particular article from Fox News, December 23rd, 2024. It says Iran is recruiting children to attack Israeli targets across Europe amid setbacks. So if you think Iran has been knocked back on its heels, to some extent it has, but Iran's hostility towards Israel haven't ceased at all. They're now recruiting children all across Europe to attack Israeli embassies. This particular article says Iran has recruited young children to commit attacks against Israeli and Jewish targets across Europe, a new trend amid several blows to Iranian proxies in recent months. The troubling pattern includes incidents in Sweden, Belgium, and Norway, as Tehran has expanded its proxy role against Israel into Europe. Fascinating report. In Stockholm, there was the recruiting of a 15-year-old boy into terrorist activity against Israelis. In Gothenburg, if I'm pronouncing that right, there was the recruiting of a 13-year-old boy in attacks against Israelis, Israeli embassies, etc. In Brussels, there was the recruitment of children as young as 14 to be involved in these attacks. The article says recruiters on behalf of the Iranian regime have reached out to minors on platforms like Telegram, TikTok, WhatsApp, according to Peter Nesser, a terrorism researcher at a Norwegian Defense Research Institute. Further attacks have gone on in Sweden and Norway. There was a 16-year-old who attacked the, I think you pronounce this, the Elbit systems, etc. I mean, this is how dark and evil and wicked this Shiite theocracy of Iran is, where Tehran is filled with such animosity towards the Jewish people in general and the nation of Israel in particular, that it's involved in sort of proxy terrorism against Israeli targets all over Europe, and they're recruiting kids in their teens to be involved in these attacks. And so I bring this to your attention because this is, again, the type of tension that Ezekiel predicts would exist in the last days between Persia or Iran and the nation of Israel. All of these things, we believe, are stage setting for the upcoming Gog Magog invasion. As horrific, as it is with Iran, recruiting children to do its dirty work across Europe against Israelis via terrorism. Notice this particular picture from X. This is from U.S. Defense News. It again highlights the hostility between Iran and Israel, which Ezekiel predicts would manifest itself in the last days. Just prior to the Gog Magog invasion, it says Iranian channel reports that the world is on the verge of witnessing extraordinary events and developments in the coming hours. Will they strike Israel again or test a nuclear weapon? So keep in mind, 2 times last year, Iran has already fired a number of projectiles from Iran proper into Israel, completely removing Iran's mask. Iran no longer working through proxies in those instances, but actually engaged in, a frontal attack against Israel, no longer working through Hezbollah, no longer working through the Houthis, no longer working through children. And this particular U.S. Defense News screenshot from X indicates that Iranian media is reporting something like that, akin to firing projectiles into Israel, is on the horizon. So what do all of these stories indicate? They indicate that the tension between Turkey and Israel is in existence. Ezekiel predicted that. And the tension between Iran and Israel is in existence. Ezekiel predicted that as well as key stage setters for the coming infamous Gog Magog invasion. If Iran and Russia are going to be involved in this invasion, it stands to reason that those two nations would start cooperating with each other, much like we see cooperation emanating from Russia and North Africa. So with that being said, to document the cooperation between Iran and Russia, notice this article from Newsweek, again, a fairly recent article, December 24th, 2024. It says Russia and Iran are to sign a strategic pact on the eve of Donald Trump's inauguration. The article says Russia and Iran plan to formalize relations with the signing of a new strategic partnership treaty in the days before President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. The new treaty, potentially occurring just days prior to Trump's inauguration on January 20th, signals an attempt by the two nations to combine their respective powers in the face of growing isolation on the world stage. Russia and Iran are members of what analysts at the Center for New American Security have dubbed the Axis of Upheaval, a group of states which also features China and North Korea. They have increasingly positioned themselves as opponents of Western powers. And this article describes this agreement that's coming between Russia and Iran as a major new interstate agreement. It's going to formalize an arrangement between those two parties, Russia and Iran. It's a commitment to close defense cooperation and interaction in the interests of regional and global peace and security. It also has provisions in it related to energy, manufacturing, transportation, agriculture. And the article says the relationship between the two nations is described as strategic and sincere, and said that economic and cultural cooperation was, quote, getting stronger by the day, close quote. In September, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken accused Iran of supplying Russia with ballistic missiles for use in Ukraine. A lot of people have tried to figure out, how does Russia's invasion of Ukraine, how does that play into the end times? Well, one of the ways it plays into the end times is, according to this article, it's bringing Russia and Iran closer together. Now, all of this is the outworking of Ezekiel's prophecies, because if Russia and Iran are, as predicted, going to invade Israel in the end time scenario, it stands to reason that those two nations would develop some sort of alliance ahead of time prior to that invasion. And that's what you see happening now on the world stage. The Ukraine situation has not slowed down that alliance between Russia and Iran. In fact, it's sped it up and expedited it. In fact, notice also this screenshot from X. This is from Nepal correspondence. It says Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman confirms that the Iran-Russia bilateral treaty will be signed in late January. The comprehensive strategic agreement will mark a major development in the Iranian-Russian relations and will include investment, economic ties, and military cooperation. So when you look at what God predicts through the prophet Ezekiel 2,600 years ago, the alignment of the nations against Israel in the last days is coming together exactly like God said it would, in the very minute details, including North Africa, including hostility between Turkey and the nation of Israel, and including the alliance between Russia and Iran. With all of that being said, let me take you to the second part of this prophecy update. Let's talk a little bit here about the kings of the East. I believe there's a very strong case to be made biblically that the kings of the East that are predicted to participate in the final battle called the Battle of Armageddon in the last days could very well include China. I believe that there's a biblical case that can be made that China represents the kings of the East spoken of in Bible prophecy. And here I'm speaking of, notice this particular graphic of our tribulation judgments. I'm speaking of trumpet judgment number 6, I believe it is, and bowl judgment number 6. In trumpet judgment number 6, we read these words, Revelation 9:13 through 16. It says, release the 4 angels, Revelation 9, verse 14, the 4 angels who are bound by the great river Euphrates, and the numbers of the armies of the horsemen. So notice that they're on horses, because a lot of people are trying to tell me these are demons. And I don't think a demon rides a horse. I think a human being rides a horse. And they're not coming out of the abyss, as you have with the 5th trumpet judgment, where demons come from. They're coming from where human beings come from, east of the Euphrates. I'm not denying that this is a demonically energized army, but it's demons influencing humans. And I think that's what John is seeing. Revelation 9, verse 16, it says, and the number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. So this is an army of 200 million on horseback coming from the far east into the nation of Israel to participate in the final battle called the Battle of Armageddon. Now, Revelation chapter 16 and verse 12, which is describing bowl judgment number 6, I believe is describing the end of this process. In other words, Revelation 9 is the first part of the process. Revelation 16 is the end of the process. It's describing the supernatural drying up of the Euphrates River to prepare the way for this giant army to participate in the final battle called Armageddon in northern Israel. Revelation 16 and verse 12 says, the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way would be prepared for the kings of the east. And here's a picture showing you exactly where the Euphrates River is. It's a geographical locale, a point of demarcation, if you would, separating the Far East or the Orient from the Middle East. And that's where that army comes from east of the Euphrates River. So Revelation 9, they're summoned. Revelation 16, their path is expedited. And when you put those prophecies together, as this giant army makes its way into northern Israel to participate in the final battle called the Battle of Armageddon, they destroy a third of the world's population as they're making their trajectory into Armageddon, northern Israel. So this is a view, the view that China is this major player here. It's not unique to me. A lot of people will tag this view to Hal Lindsey, but actually the view precedes Hal Lindsey, and it goes back at least as far to the great scholar Dr. John Walvoord in his Revelation commentary. And this is exactly how Dr. Walvoord interprets, I should say, trumpet judgment 6 and bowl judgment number 6. Notice the last sentence here in this paragraph that we have on the screen. It says, the rising power of parts of the Orient in our day in countries such as Japan, China, he says, China, and India, as well as lesser nations, make such an invasion a reasonable prediction. So if I'm understanding all of this correctly, China, along with a lot of the players that we talked about in Ezekiel 38 and 39 earlier, Russia, Iran, Libya, will play a massive role in the end times scenario. So it is of no great surprise, at least to me and other students of Bible prophecy, that China is not only aggressive and belligerent and bellicose on the world stage, but is actually forming alliances with the very players that we spoke of in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Notice this particular article from Reuters. Again, in a recent article, December 27th, 2024, it says China's Xi will visit Russia in 2025. Russian ambassador says, and to kind of summarize this article, it says plans are being drawn up for China's president to visit Russia in 2025. China's foreign ministry reiterates close ties between the two nations, and the Russian leader Putin says there are no limits to partnership with China. The article says at a regular press conference, China's foreign ministry did not confirm the visit, but reiterated that the two countries maintain close contacts at all levels. The article says Xi was received in the Kremlin as a, quote, dear friend, close quote, in 2024. Actually, in 2024 and 2023. So if we're as close to all of the fulfillment of all of these end times prophecies as I think we are, and China is one of the players, and Russia is one of the players against Israel in the last days, is it any great shock to discover that those two massive communist countries are in a very close alliance with each other, just like Russia and Iran, Russia and North Africa are in a close alliance with one another as well. Along these same lines, notice this particular article from MEMRI. MEMRI stands for Middle East Media Research Institute. It's a very helpful website because what it does is it takes the speeches of these foreign leaders, typically given in Arabic, and translates them into English so you can see exactly what their motives are. Because many times they'll say one thing here in the United States and something completely different when they're back home. And this particular article, again, a recent article, December the 31st, 2024, it says, upon arriving in China, Iranian foreign minister publishes an article in China's People's Daily. And here's what the article was about. My trip to China is the beginning of a new era of strategic cooperation. Here's what the article says. On December 27th, 2024, upon his arrival in China on a diplomatic visit, Iranian foreign minister published an article in the Chinese outlet People's Daily in which he discussed the promising nature of Iran-China relations. Look at that, Iran-China relations, stating that his visit to China marked the beginning of a golden half-century of the Iran-China relations, in which he said would include bilateral, strategic, and pragmatic cooperation. He underlined the two countries shared a view of the Palestinian cause and the urgency of ceasefire in Gaza. Notice what brings these powers together, in this case Iran and China, their mutual hatred for the nation of Israel. Also during his visit, the Iranian foreign minister told reporters that the issues raised in his meetings in the country included bilateral cooperation, which he said includes a wide range of economic, cultural, and political cooperation. These countries are coming together in the area of trade security, security itself, the economy, and energy. It should be noted that China is Iran's biggest trading partner. Talks here about strategic cooperation between these two powers under the shade of harmony, empathy, and cooperation. So, article going on to talk about close cultural and museum exchanges between the countries. The article says the cooperation between Iran and China builds on the holding of a 2024 naval security drill, which was an expression of high-level cooperation and joint effort to ensure maritime security. And again, the tie that binds is the ceasefire in Gaza and the Palestinian cause. How fascinating it is to watch not just the big three, Iran, Russia, and Turkey, cooperate with each other, but now China is thrown into the mix. China is cooperating with Russia, as we said earlier. China is cooperating with Iran. Shouldn't be a surprise if China, along with these other nations, is one of the major players in anti-Israel activity, hot war against Israel in the last days. Notice this particular screenshot again from X, and it says China has planned to send 92 wing-loomed armed UAVs worth $1 billion to where? To Libya. Libya's Haftar, via a UK-based shell company, bypassing an international arms ban. The drones disguised as COVID-19 aid were to be exchanged for discounted Libyan crude oil. So here is China now cooperating with Russia. Here is China cooperating with Iran. And now here is China cooperating with one of the other nations in the Gog Magog invasion that we spoke of a little bit earlier, Libya. So not only is Russia cooperating with Libya, but China is cooperating with Libya as well. As we like to say, the world is not falling apart. The pieces are falling into place, into the identical scenario God predicted in His Word over 2,000 years ago. China is destined to be very aggressive in the last days, if we're understanding these prophecies correctly. So screenshots like the following from X shouldn't be surprising. You'll notice what it says here. Breaking: China cuts undersea internet cables to Taiwan. The Chinese invasion into Taiwan is, in my opinion, not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. And so all of the countries that are expected to be very aggressive in the last days are acting like that routinely on the world stage. And as we've tried to demonstrate here, they're cooperating with each other. Let's go to the final area of this particular prophecy update, having dealt with Gog Magog and the kings of the East in Bible prophecy. Let's say a few words, if we could, about anti-Semitism. The irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That type of mentality and philosophy will explode in the last days. In fact, I think it'll reach its zenith in Revelation chapter 12. Notice this graphic here where we're trying to connect Revelation chapter 12 to anti-Semitism. When you study Revelation chapter 12, verses 6 through 17, it's the dragon, or Satan, who apparently still has access to God's throne room, not to minister and accuse as he once did as a high-ranking angel, rather not to minister and worship as he once did as a high-ranking angel, but rather to communicate and accuse. Apparently that privilege is taken away midway through the tribulation period as the temple is desecrated and he plummets to the earth. And his whole agenda at that point in the second half of the tribulation period is to declare war. The Greek word used in that chapter is polemos, where we get the word polemic. Declare war against the woman who is clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars, which is a clear reference to the nation of Israel. When you factor in Joseph's dream given in Genesis 37, verses 9 and 10, it's the height of anti-Semitism manifesting itself in the second half of the tribulation period. Now, what's very, very interesting about this is that's just one of many passages I could cite which clearly predict and anticipate the acceleration of anti-Semitism in the last days. And what we're seeing now as we move closer and closer to the end times scenario is anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred for the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is not only accelerating, it's on steroids. And to help us sort of unpack that, notice this particular article from Israel 365 News. This is, again, a recent article written by Jonathan Feldstein, January 1st, 2025, and it deals with the recent passing of one of our American presidents, Jimmy Carter. And this article points out, and I want to be careful here because I always want to be respectful towards the dead, and I want to be somewhat respectful towards a former American president who's part of a very elite group. And we've had a lot of sort of whitewashed history over the last few weeks given to us about Jimmy Carter since his passing. But the truth of the matter is Jimmy Carter was could most likely be categorized as an anti-Semite at his core. I mean, his own writings and speeches that he gave post-president and some of the things he did as president demonstrate that. And the fact that nobody wants to talk about this out of showing respect for a former president, it sort of indicates the type of anti-Semitism that is enveloping the globe, where we won't even call out people who are blatant anti-Semites. And it shouldn't matter whether they were former presidents or not. And the fact that everybody wants to sort of not touch this particular news item demonstrates that we have embraced an anti-Semitic philosophy to the point where we won't even call out people of fame and fortune, who happen to have an anti-Semitic philosophy. But the Feldstein piece does just that. And this is information that we need to know about former President Jimmy Carter. A few excerpts, if I may, from this particular article. It says, okay, Jimmy Carter died. Many will fill volumes writing now that he was a good guy, honest, intelligent, and did some good things as president and even into his post-presidency. Despite many of these things being true, to me, Carter was an unrepentant anti-Semite who made excuses for Arab aggression against Israel. Now, Carter wrote a book, and I think we have a screenshot of that particular book. The title of it is Palestine Peace, Not Apartheid. And here is a direct quote from this particular book. It says, quote, Jimmy Carter writing, "It is imperative that the general Arab community and all significant Palestinian groups make it clear that they will end the suicide bombing and other acts of terrorism when international laws and the ultimate goals for the roadmap for peace are accepted by Israel," close quote. And what he's saying in that particular statement, in his published writings, in his own book, is terrorism against Israel is acceptable until Israel accepts the world's terms for peace, which always involve, Israel having to give up land in exchange for the illusory promise of peace. If Israel won't accept that, then let the bombing continue. Let the terrorism continue. And I guarantee you in all of these news outlets that are sort of commemorating and memorializing and venerating the life of Jimmy Carter, this aspect of his philosophy and mindset is never brought to people's attention. And the reason it's never brought to people's attention is we're living in an anti-Semitic environment where we're uncomfortable bringing up these kinds of things. We're living in the type of environment and climate, anti-Semitic wise, that the Bible anticipates for the end times. Feldstein says basically as long as Israel doesn't do what Carter thinks it should do, terrorism against Israel will continue and is legitimate. The article goes on here and talks about an interesting exchange Feldstein had with Jimmy Carter. The article says Carter repeatedly blamed the Jews both for voting for Ted Kennedy in an unprecedented primary campaign against Carter and then losing to Ronald Reagan. In other words, he had the primary challenge, I believe, in 1980 from Ted Kennedy, and then he was ultimately defeated in the general election in 1980 by Ronald Reagan, and it was the Jews' fault, according to Jimmy Carter. It wasn't due to his incompetence as a president. It's the fault of them Jews. And when I say them Jews, I'm quoting the words of Reverend Jeremiah Wright, who referred to the Jews around Obama at the time as them Jews. Apparently, Carter had that same mindset. This article goes on and it says, as a student at Emory, where his failed presidency had not been able to find a home, I had several interactions with Carter. He was charming, and his soft-spoken demeanor caused one to think that he was a good guy. One day in the late 1980s, he was making public remarks following another trip throughout the Middle East, where he had no problem cozying up to the original Assad dictatorship and other terror leaders. His public comments through the trip were a dizzying litany of anti-Israel comments throughout the Arab capitals where he was feted when he was in Israel. He blamed Israel for everything wrong and the lack of peace in the Middle East. During the question and answer, there was time for one question, and my hand shot up, says Feldstein. It was the week of the anniversary of the Camp David Accords, and I thanked him for helping to make possible with his that possible with his big peanut smile, Feldstein says. Then I asked him, as a representative of Emory University, was it academically disingenuous to travel the world and blame Israel for a lack of peace while not holding the Arabs at least equally accountable? His peanut smile then turned into a scowl, and he began a tirade about how I was wrong and Israel was to blame. Here's how Feldstein's article ends. It says, he was a failed one-term president, and he did once unambiguously call for and justify the terrorist murder of my people. This disqualifies him from sainthood or any other honors and memories that others will share in the coming days. At least in remembering his life, let us not forget that he at least indirectly caused tremendous pain, suffering, and death, for which building houses for poor people, Habitat for Humanity, in other words, Carter's organization, is no redeeming compensation. Feldstein's point is pretty simple. When you look at Jimmy Carter, don't just remember Habitat for Humanity and his humanitarian works. You have to also remember his anti-Israel mentality and his anti-Israel mindset. And I bring this to people's attention because as Carter's life is being venerated, this part of his philosophy is not being brought to the surface. And the reason it's not being brought to the surface, I think, is we're comfortable, sadly enough, with this sort of anti-Semitism. Of course, that shouldn't surprise us because the Bible anticipates the expansion, the explosion of the growth of anti-Semitism in the last days. Here is a screenshot. This comes from USA Today. This was published, I believe, in 2014, and it says Jimmy Carter calls for recognizing terror group Hamas. The article says former President Jimmy Carter called on the West to recognize the U.S. designated terrorist group Hamas as a legitimate political actor that represents the bulk of the Palestinian population. Carter made the comments in an article he co-wrote with Irish President Mark Robinson in the new issue of Foreign Policy magazine. It was published as a ceasefire look hold Tuesday after 4 weeks of fighting between Israel and Hamas, which governs Gaza. So here's Carter post-presidency 2014, recognizing the terrorist group Hamas. The very group that caused so much mayhem for the Israelis in the events of October the 7th, 2023. This is the real Jimmy Carter. This is the type of anti-Semitism, anti-Israelism coming from this particular president that the Bible says would manifest itself in these last days. What do you do when anti-Semitism comes from the right, though? we anticipate anti-Semitism from the left, like people like Jimmy Carter. What do you do when it comes from the right? And that's the kind of thing that we're seeing as well. Anti-Semitism from the left and the right. And to demonstrate this, let me take you to this particular article here, written by Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, fairly recent article, December the 18th, 2024, from Israel 365 News, and it deals with Tucker Carlson and the trajectory of the Tucker Carlson network as Tucker Carlson interviews Jeffrey Sachs. And the article's subtitle is Tucker Carlson Hits the Trifecta of Anti-Semitism. There's a lot here in this article. I wish I had time to read the whole thing, but I'll try to summarize it to the best of my abilities. Conservative commentator Tucker Carlson earned the renewed ire of the pro-Israel crowd when he hosted a 2-hour interview with Jeffrey Sachs, an economist at Columbia University who has repeatedly accused Israel of genocide. Israel's Minister of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism characterized the interview on a Twitter post, quote, "Congratulations to Tucker Carlson for becoming the lead platform for fringe Holocaust deniers, conspiracy theorists, and blood libel enthusiasts who oppose the state of Israel." In a claim that could have been taken directly from the anti-Semitic propaganda protocols of the Elders of Zion, Sachs implied that Israel has a hidden expansionist agenda to take over the Middle East. In a shocking modern-day blood libel, Sachs accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of creating Hamas and Hezbollah to expand the Jewish state's borders and achieve a greater Israel. Sachs claimed that Netanyahu had manipulated U.S. foreign policy, tricking the government into going to war with Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and the Sudan. Netanyahu, I regard as one of the most delusional and dangerous people on the planet. He has enraged the United States so far in his 6 disastrous wars, and he's aiming to engage us in yet one more, Sachs says in the Carlson interview. I mean, this is the type of thing that you now routinely get from Tucker Carlson and the Tucker Carlson network, in spite of the fact that Tucker Carlson continues to be extremely popular with MAGA people and conservatives. The article goes on and it does a tremendous deep dive into this individual whose last name is Sachs, first name Jeffrey, that Carlson was platforming. And Sachs has been, making these kind of statements for a long time. Anti-Israelism is in his background. And yet, this is not the first time Carlson has done this, because the article mentions a trifecta of anti-Semitism coming from Carlson. The article says this is the third rabid anti-Israel interview Tucker Carlson has done at this point, and it's fair to ask why. The article goes on and it talks about how Carlson aired an edited version of an interview with rapper and fashion designer Kanye West. 1 week later, the Vice website Motherboard published leaked unaired footage from the interview. In the unaired footage, West expressed Black Hebrew Israelite views, denying that Jews are descendants of the biblical Hebrews. He also repeated the anti-Semitic trope that Jews are greedy and control the financial system. I mean, these are the people that Tucker Carlson is platforming. In April, Carlson hosted Munther Isaac, a pastor of an evangelical Lutheran Christmas church in Bethlehem, who has a long history of anti-Semitism. The article goes on and it says, Carlson, one of the most widely viewed political commentators, raised ire again September the 2nd, 2024, when he hosted a podcaster and historical or historian amateur Daryl Cooper. Without correction or contradiction from Carlson, Cooper endorsed Holocaust denial. Cooper called Winston Churchill the chief villain of World War II and claimed that the Nazis did not intentionally perpetuate the Holocaust. Cooper claimed that the death of Nazi prisoners of war and political dissidents was the cause of poor planning and logistical issues rather than murder. The article goes on and it says Tucker Carlson, also advocated for U.S. isolationism, criticizing both President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson for their support for military aid to Israel. Carlson's anti-Israel commentary predates his independent career. While reporting on the 2006 Lebanon War for NBC News, he criticized the tactics used by Israeli Defense Forces in fighting for Hezbollah. This article goes on and it ties Jeffrey Sachs, the first person mentioned in this article, to George Soros. George Soros has a history of anti-Israelism. Soros has compared Israel to Nazi Germany. Soros-born Jewish, lived through the Holocaust in Hungary, surviving as a courier for the Jewish Council that identified and kept track of Jews for the Nazi occupiers. I mean, these are the people that, Tucker Carlson is platforming. People like Jeffrey Sachs with ties to George Soros, who has a background essentially working for the Nazis. He's platforming Kanye West. He's platforming Daryl Cooper. He's platforming Munther Isaac. He also platformed, the article doesn't mention it, but he also platformed, I think his first name is John, last name is Rich, famous singer, who said that the Schofield Reference Bible, that we'll reference in just a moment, is actually connected to the New World Order and the Rothschilds. This article concludes by quoting Jonathan Toobin, editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, who came to a similar conclusion in an editorial in the Jewish Chronicle in which he warned that anti-Semitism is growing in the conservative movement. It's now incumbent on all decent people, and especially those on the right, to demand that Carlson no longer be treated as a mainstream figure, Toobin wrote. Call it cancel culture if you like, but the notion that someone who thinks it's acceptable or legitimate to question the truth about the Holocaust ought not to have access to a potential president, as Carlson appears to have with Trump, it's entirely reasonable. That remains true even if Trump's pro-Israel policies are the opposite of the former Fox News host Carlson. So this is a very troubling article, which shows you that anti-Semitism is not just coming from Jeremiah Wright. It's not just coming from voices on the left like AOC, Tlaib, etc., the Squad. It's not just coming from the Jimmy Carters of the world. It's now coming from the right. There are loud, prominent voices within the so-called conservative movement, so-called within the MAGA movement, that are anti-Semitic at their core. Again, troubling, but not surprising, because the Bible clearly anticipates that as we move closer and closer to the end-time scenario, anti-Semitism will grow from all sources. In fact, notice this particular picture, again, from X, and it sort of exposes why the Tucker Carlson network is moving in the direction it's moving in. It's from someone named A.J. Steele and the A.J. Steele Show. It says, I used to respect Tucker Carlson, but he's clearly gone down the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory path. Was he always a bigot? Is it his sagging ratings? Or did he choose this course when a rich Muslim who was a Democrat Party donor, Omid Malik, funded his new media company? ? So follow the money. Where is Tucker Carlson getting his financing from? That may explain the anti-Semitic trajectory, the anti-Semitic direction of his network. And on this horrific subject of anti-Semitism coming from the right, one more picture or screenshot from X before we wrap up this particular prophecy update. This is from Candace Owens herself. I mean, Candace Owens is someone that I used to respect and read and follow as a conservative commentator, but she's moving in this Tucker Carlson direction related to the Jews and the nation of Israel. And she's making comments here about criticisms of the Schofield Reference Bible. She is quoting or reposting something from someone named Martyr Maid, criticizing the Schofield Reference Bible. This particular quote from Martyr Maid, December 9th, 2024 says, I don't know why you ignore the obvious and clear message that the covenant is with the church. And that he's referring to the Jews who accept Christ. It's honestly shocking that you people believe God elevates certain people based on, ethnicity. And what Martyr Maid is arguing, therefore, is Augustinian supersessionism, that the church has superseded Israel, or what today is known as replacement theology. Israel's covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, and her related subcovenants have now been transferred to the church, and Israel now nationally has been cut off as a people, something that the unconditional Abrahamic covenant says could never happen. I mean, if God can break the Abrahamic covenant, then his character is in doubt. He can break any promise he has made to anyone, including promises he's made to Gentile Christians in John chapter 3, verse 16, and other places. So so-called Martyr Maid here is just articulating hardcore replacement theology, going all the way back to the city of God. Augustine, or Augustine is probably the better pronunciation, back in the 4th century AD. I mean, this is a heresy that Martyr Maid is articulating. Now watch Candace Owens retweet these heretical comments, and notice what she says in the process. She says it's so wonderful to finally see dispensationalism and the Schofield Bible being publicly debated in America. Candace, dispensationalism and the Schofield Reference Bible have been debated from time immemorial. Don't act like our system of dispensationalism has never been publicly debated. But she goes on and says, American Christians have been completely hypnotized and are finally learning the true history of Cyrus Schofield and who sponsored his biblical notations. And so what she's doing there is she's trying to take Schofield, who gave us the Schofield Reference Bible, and drag him through the mud. And the problem with Candace Owens and her analysis here is her problem isn't with Cyrus Schofield. All Cyrus Schofield did in his study Bible is he tried to take the promises of God and interpret them literally. Every single Old Testament prophet, for example, other than Jonah, anticipates a regathering of the Jews into their homeland in the last days. First, they'll come back in unbelief, and then as the events of the tribulation period unfold, they will be nationally converted. And so what you'll finally have at the end of everything is a politically born and spiritually born nation of Israel. And virtually every single Old Testament prophet, other than the prophet Jonah, predicts this. And so when Candace Owens is speaking out against the Jews, she's not speaking out against the Scofield Reference Bible. She's speaking out against God. The only thing the Scofield Reference Bible did is it took all of those promises in the prophets and other places in the Bible and explained them to people how they should be construed literally in the footnotes and the endnotes and the study notes of the Scofield Reference Bible. So Candace Owens thinks if she can drag Scofield and the Scofield Reference Bible through the mud, then somehow she can destroy the love of Christianity for the Jewish people. And I'm here to tell you, Candace, that you can drag Scofield through the mud all you want. You can find all kinds of skeletons in his closet, just like you can find skeletons in anyone's closet. But your ultimate problem is not with the Scofield Reference Bible. Your problem is with God himself, who anticipates and predicted the regathering of the Jews into the land of Israel in the last days. So here you've got a prominent conservative figure, Candace Owens, not only regularly retweeting and reposting heretical statements, arguing for replacement theology, but engaged now in an open and vitriolic public attack against dispensationalists like myself and readers of the Scofield Reference Bible, not understanding that she's actually fighting God himself, because it's God who predicted the regathering of the Jews into their ancient homeland in the last days. So I want everyone to notice here that anti-Semitism is not just coming from Jimmy Carter. It's coming not just from the left, but it's coming from Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens on the right, and that fits with the end time scenario, which anticipates a resurgence of anti-Semitism in the last days. Well, we tried to cover an awful lot in this particular prophecy update, covered three things, brought you up to speed on the Gog Magog alignment, brought you up to speed on China's role in prophecy and how the stage is being set for that, and tried to bring you up to speed in the resurgence of anti-Semitism in the last days. Just a couple of infomercials by way of closing. Since we went a tad long here today, let me close very quickly, but first let me mention these infomercials. I'm the president of a school, Schaefer Theological Seminary, and we are offering our schedule of classes. In fact, on the screen, we're hoping to put up there in just a moment our spring registration. There's a list there of all of the classes that you can sign up for. Registration is going to go from the 2nd of January all the way through the 17th. There's a host of classes being offered. If you're considering seminary training, we invite you to take a look at that schedule and take a course or two and perhaps work towards a certificate or a degree. We're primarily an online institution, and you can do all of this from the comfort of your own home via Zoom link, etc. So take a good hard look at that schedule, because if you want to sign up for a class, now is the time to do that. I want to make you aware of our prophecy conference that's coming up very quickly here at Sugarland Bible Church. It's a Faith to Final Days conference. Registration is filling up. We invite you to go to the Sugarland website and sign up, slbc.org. featuring speakers Bill Federer, Olivier Melnick, Dr. Randall Price, and myself. Special music by Olam Worship and also by Claude and Rebecca Chu. There's a Friday banquet on the 21st at nearby Sugar Creek Country Club. We're going to have the all-day conference here on Saturday, culminating in a question and answer session amongst the various speakers. Saturday the 22nd. And then we're going to have our speakers presenting during our normal service times here at Sugarland Bible Church on Sunday morning. So what you need to sign up for is your ambition to participate either in the Friday section of the conference or the Saturday section of the conference. The Sunday section of the conference you don't have to sign up for since it's a regular church service, but this is an intense prophecy conference, and if you come and participate in this, this is going to equip you issues related to Israel, prophecy, the Christian worldview, and it's going to equip you for where God has you in your walk with the Lord and where you're ministering. And so this conference is one of those conferences that will edify and fortify you for your role in the last days. One other conference I want to bring to your attention that's coming up pretty quick here is a conference that's going to be held at Grace and Truth Bible Church. This conference is going to run February 14th through the 16th. The location of this church is the Bridge Church Building, Fort Valley, Georgia. Speakers will be Pastor Kevin Lucas, Pastor Dennis Roxer, and myself. And also Sean Laughlin. Let's see, I see a picture of my book up there. Let's go and put the picture of the conference up if we could. And essentially what this conference is it's a conference dealing with God's plan and Satan's attack on the various divine institutions. I mean, what are the divine institutions? They are protections that the Creator has built into the fabric of fallen creation, allowing fallen creation to be sustained in spite of its fallenness. So there's the institution of human government, institution of marriage, institution of the family. And so these are the focus of the different subjects that are going to be dealt with at this conference. Understanding the divine institutions is critical towards a Christian worldview. And so Kevin Lucas, if we can put the schedule back up, is going to be dealing with the basics of the divine institutions. I'm going to be dealing with the divine institution of human government. Pastor Sean Laughlin is going to be dealing with the divine institution of marriage. I'm again going to be dealing with the divine institution of nationalism and Israel. Sean Laughlin is going to be dealing with the divine institution of the family, and it looks like it's capped off by the teaching of Pastor Dennis Roxer, who's going to be dealing with the divine institution of the church. And on the screen there, you should be able to see, if your eyes are good, phone numbers and email addresses that you can contact to get more information on this particular conference. We would encourage you not to contact Sugarland Bible Church to find information on the conference because we don't have it, but rather contact Grace and Truth Bible Church in Georgia to learn about this upcoming conference. And one other quick thing as we close, let's go ahead and put up a picture of my book again. This is my brand new book, just came out, available on Amazon. The title of it is The Bible and Your Vote. You know, it kind of deals with a lot of the same subjects and topics that are going to be dealt with at the Divine Institutions Conference. But it's a topical Bible study teaching you how God thinks on key issues economic issues, social issues, foreign affairs issues that we regularly vote on. It's not a pro-Trump per se book or an anti-Hillary book or an anti-Kamala Harris book. No modern, political names are used in the book. Rather, it's a topical Bible study showing us as evangelical Christians how we can vote biblically. That's our prophecy update for today. I hope you enjoyed this first prophecy update of the new year, and we will be back with you next week here on Pastor's Point of View to bring to you more cutting edge prophetic information. And we'll see you next week. God bless you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.